Good afternoon. Good morning. Boy, that was good Monday morning. We're on the record, case number 12, CF 1083A, State versus George Zimmerman. Everybody is here and in place. Council approach for just a minute. Ready with our first juror. Do you know Deputy Jarvis?
Yes, Your Honor.
Well, I was asking the deputy if she was back there, but the parties are ready. Yes, we are.
Your Honor, H7 is present.
Please be seated, and good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Welcome back. And you're referred to here as juror H7, and the attorneys are going to have an opportunity to talk to you about the questionnaire that you filled out last Tuesday morning. And we're going to begin with Mr. De La Ronda. You may proceed.
Good morning, sir. Good morning. We'll call you H7 or sir. As Judge Nelson indicated, we're limited in this part of the voir dire or jury selection in asking you about publicity or other issues, limited to what the questionnaire you filled out. I understood from the questionnaire that I had an opportunity to read that you said, in terms of what you've heard about the case, only what's been on the news. So I'm going to need to explore that with you in terms of what you mean by that. And let's focus on your source of information. Was it the local news, national news, or both?
Probably both.
Okay. Local news, TV or newspaper?
Primarily TV.
Okay. Do you recall what station or channel?
I really don't.
All of them?
All of them, most likely, yeah.
Do you favor one channel over another, usually when you get your evening news or morning news?
Channel 6, probably.
Okay. And in terms of national, was there one particular station, or some people like Fox and people like CNN? some like the regular CBS, NBC, ABC?
Typically CBS.
Okay. Did you do any research, or is your source of information also through the internet? Sometimes people read the newspaper on the internet or do other kind of stuff.
Nothing like that.
You're not one of those people that has Facebook and gets on Facebook and gets media information from that?
I don't even have a Facebook account.
Okay, I can relate to that. And how about YouTube or any of that? Okay.
No, no, sir.
Since you got the summons 3 or 4 weeks ago, did you, in preparation, some people think they need to rush up on what cases are out there. Did you do any rushing up on cases out there?
No, sir.
All right. Then let's talk about what you do recall in terms of on this case. Is your first point of reference or contact with this case at the very beginning stages, or throughout, or at the end?
I mean, I vaguely remember when it first started because of all the media attention it got.
Sure,
But,
okay.
All right. So, I mean, it's been kind of, I guess, throughout it.
Okay. This happened back in February of last year. Do you think around?
Okay.
You didn't remember that?
I would not have known that,
Okay,
no.
all right. What I'm trying to ask is, was in relation to last year sometime when you first learned of the case? Let me ask you this way.
Okay.
What is your memory of your first impressions of the case? What do you remember hearing?
I just remember hearing that a person had been shot and there was a big brouhaha going on in Sanford. That was it.
Okay. Any particulars about how the person was shot, or who had shot him, or the circumstance related to the shooting?
No, I mean, other than I finally learned his name because it was in the news so much. But
His
other than
name
that,
being George Zimmerman?
that is correct.
Okay. While we're talking about George Zimmerman, any more information related to Mr. Zimmerman that you heard about on the news? Anything about him at all other than he was arrested and charged with this case?
I mean, I really don't remember a whole lot about it. I think he was somehow involved in whatever community he was, in a community watch program or something like that.
Anything about the victim, the person that was shot? Anything about him?
Only thing I remember is I heard he was from Miami or somewhere in that area and had been visiting kinfolks here or relatives here or something like that.
Okay. Anything else you can recall about him?
He was young.
Okay. Now, at some point, obviously, you became aware that the media was focusing on this case. Do you remember the circumstances regarding why it became a high-profile case?
Well, I don't know why it became I don't, and I still don't understand why it's a whole high-profile case.
What are your memories as to how it became a high-profile case in terms of what you read, what you saw on TV?
I guess outside folks came in and had some kind of protest or something about having Mr. Zimmerman arrested or something like that.
Okay.
That's kind of basically
Sure.
what I remember about
Okay.
it.
Do you remember anything about who the outside folks were
No.
in particular?
I mean, I can't tell you what their names were, no.
Okay. And do you remember anything about protests, what they involved, and who they were in favor of or against? Or
I didn't know they were in favor of anything other than they wanted Mr. Zimmerman to go to trial.
Okay.
That was my impression of it.
Okay. Did you come to any conclusions? I know in reading your questionnaire you have stated and written that you have not formed an opinion as to the guilt or innocence of Mr. Zimmerman. And that's true? Still?
Absolutely not.
Okay. My question is, sometimes we form impressions or opinions that, as things are going, and then we can say at the end that we have not formed an opinion. And I'm going to try to, as much as I can, try to get you to think about that.
Okay.
As it was going along, did you form any impressions or opinions about what was going on and the circumstances leading up to Mr. Zimmerman's arrest? You mentioned protests. How did you feel about that? That there were people from outside in some way, to use your word, protesting here?
I mean, to me, it was just nuisance.
Okay. Do you believe that A nuisance, can you elaborate a little bit more in terms of just there were traffic blocking or just in terms of?
Yeah, that, disrupting typical, I guess, events in the area,
Okay, all right.
Again, basically I couldn't understand why anybody was even bringing up that issue to me. It was not something that was worthy of that type of attention.
Okay, when you say that issue, you're talking about what?
The shooting.
Okay, the shooting that, I think you stated that in terms of no arrest had been done, so they wanted an arrest or a trial or something. Is that your understanding of what was going on?
That was at least what I thought was the purpose of the protest, or if you want to call it that.
Okay. And other than describing it as a nuisance, did you feel any other way about that? And my question, not at all?
No.
Okay. My question is, some people feel like, why the heck are people out there protesting? And, they shouldn't be doing that. There's no cause. Or some people say, hey, they have a First Amendment right just like anybody else. And there's some people that are in between. Would you fit into one category or another, or?
Hey, if they wanted to do it, I had no problem with them doing it.
Okay. So you didn't think it was a negative mark or a detriment to the city or to the county at all?
No.
In terms of, okay. Other than they wanted an arrest or something to be done, do you remember anything else about the protests?
No, to me, that's kind of what the purpose of it was.
Okay.
At least I thought it was anyway.
Now, some people, especially if you're from the South, you say, what are these people from somewhere else coming? Did you feel in any way like, why do they need to, why somebody from out of town or out of state need to come and get people here to get riled up or whatever?
Yeah, I kind of had that
Sure.
feeling, I guess, if you
Okay.
want to call it that.
Okay.
Again, not understanding why somebody was making a big to-do out of it. I felt that our local government could take care of itself.
Sure. Do you remember anything else regarding, eventually, obviously, you became aware that Mr. Zimmerman was arrested. Do you remember anything related to Mr. Zimmerman's arrest, how that came about, or the circumstances either with the police department or anybody else associated with this case?
When he actually got arrested?
Yeah.
No,
You remember anything about that at all?
I really don't.
Okay. How about in terms of on TV, you remember any photographs related to this case at all?
I do.
Tell us if you can about that.
I saw a couple of photographs of Mr. Zimmerman that they had on the news, and
Remember what they looked like?
they were, I think, the ones that they took. I don't know where they took him, but I guess the police department took him, and they showed some injuries to his head and some bloody nose or blood on his head or something like
Sure.
that. I don't, that's about what I remember
Okay.
about it.
And was that back last year or recently or?
No, I was way.
Okay. Did you form any
Several.
impressions when you saw those photographs?
Other than the fact that he obviously was in some altercation with someone.
Okay. How about, did you see any other pictures that you can recall?
Just of the person himself. Mr. Zimmerman on the news.
I'm sorry. other than-
Just like seeing him here today, just
Oh,
a
okay,
picture of him.
okay, you saw him okay.
Right.
How about, did you remember any kind of videos or recordings of any type, either audio or video recordings of any type in this case?
I remember him being discussed. I'd never heard him.
Okay,
There was this thing about somebody had a 911 call. But
you
I don't
never
remember.
listened to it at all?
I do not remember it.
Okay.
I'm sure I heard it
Sure.
somewhere in the news, but I don't remember it, no.
Sometimes people, we watch things and then we, kind of dismiss them, and then other people, they remember great details. Are you one of those individuals that you heard it, but you don't remember anything about it?
I'm positive I heard it, and no, I don't
Okay.
remember a whole lot about it.
Sure. How about,
it wasn't something that was of personal interest to me.
Right, that makes, I'm not trying to argue with you or quibble with you about that. It makes sense from just, you didn't know you were going to be on a jury or potentially on the jury, I'm assuming, right?
Absolutely not.
Okay. How about commentary about it? Forget about what the recordings were about. What, if any, commentary do you recall hearing about it?
guess it would depend on which day and what version.
Sure, okay. Did you hear different stories or commentary about it?
I would say that the news doesn't know what they're doing. Yeah, that's what I would say.
Tell me a little bit about that. What do you mean by that?
I mean, one day they would have this emphasis and the next day would have this emphasis or a different emphasis.
Sure. So did you feel the media one day maybe was favorable or emphasizing on behalf of Mrs. Zimmerman, and the other way, other days maybe on behalf of Trayvon Martin?
No, I thought they were just trying to sell news.
Trying to sell news?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Whatever they did, they would couch it such that it would, sell more news. That was my opinion of it.
So,
Not that they were trying to say what was happening, wasn't happening.
So did you think they were sensationalizing it maybe?
Absolutely.
Okay. Did you pay attention to any of the proceedings that were occurring throughout either, at the early beginning stages or obviously more recently?
When you say pay attention, I mean, obviously I saw something on the news about it.
Let me digress, if I could, back to last year. If there were proceedings related to this case, do you remember any proceedings in front of the judge, any comments by the court or rulings by the judge, or that kind of stuff is what I'm trying to prod your memory.
From that length ago, no. I
Okay.
probably don't remember anything the judge said until maybe recently.
Sure. What do you remember recently the judge saying?
About, before the jury started, there was some questions coming up about whether the jurors would be sequestered or not, what types of information the defense would be able to present, what you were going to, prosecution side was going to be able to defend or present.
Right. What do you remember in terms of what kind of stuff the defense would be able to present or not present, and what the prosecution or state could present or not?
I guess on the defense side, I kind of remember things about the young man's background and things that he had maybe done in Miami area.
Okay.
On the prosecution side, I don't remember.
Okay. All right, okay.
I don't remember what you guys were discussing.
Okay. That's fine. In terms of the young man's background, what do you remember the court deciding on that? Or what do you remember specifically about what was being discussed about his background or what he had done in Miami?
I guess the two things that stuck out in my mind was that I heard discussion about his parents asking or making the young man leave town and go visit whoever the relatives were in this area because of some behavioral problems.
Okay.
That was probably the main thing that I remember.
Sure. Okay. And if you remember that, assuming that was accurate, I'm not conceding that, but assuming the media got that right and there was a proceeding related to that, but assuming that is accurate, but it doesn't come in, and then assuming also it's not accurate and it doesn't come in at all, assuming you don't hear about it in the court, in the trial at all, if you're picked as a juror, could you just remove that from your memory completely when deciding this case?
Absolutely. To me, it probably happens in more cases that we know about. Okay. As far as a person, having that type of.
And you can put it in a different compartment and completely agree not to use it. In other words, in your personal life or in stuff, we all are subject to certain things and we realize at work or something that there's some stuff, okay, it's irrelevant, I have to exclude it out. Do you think that's possible for people to do that?
Sure.
Okay, do you believe you can do that?
I do it all the time in my work.
Okay, are there things at work where you come across something and then you go, okay, I cannot consider that?
Right.
Examples of employee problems or something like that, or just stuff that you...
Well, in my job, we do a lot of contracting and source selection types of things, and you have to, when you're doing that, you can't use any information that's not presented to us at that time, even though you may know something about it.
Okay. So you would agree as a juror that you would have to abide by the court's instructions and law that nothing that actually, unless it's stated in the courtroom by way of a witness or presented as part of evidence, It's speculation, it's not evidence, it's not admissible, and you cannot consider it.
However, the judge tells us.
Sure, and she's gonna do a much better job of I'm telling you that specific law, I was just paraphrasing. But you can agree to do that.
I have no problem with that at all.
I gather you're not one of those individuals that's like, hey, I got an opportunity now to be on the jury, and I'm gonna do everything I can to get on, or, we have some people that wanna get off, some people that wanna get on because they think they're gonna write a novel, or, be famous on TV for 10 minutes after. I gather you're not one of those individuals.
I would rather not be here if
Okay.
that's a question, but.
No, that's an honest question, sure. I guess we digress, and I apologize. In terms of what you had recalled, photographs, video, any other commentary about Mr. Zimmerman? Anything about him in terms of, him as in general? Forget about the facts of the case. Anything about his history in terms of, where he's from, that kind of stuff? Anything about him?
No, I really don't know where he's from.
Sure.
If I had to guess, I seem to remember something of somewhere up north. He moved down here, but that would be speculation.
Right.
I don't remember to tell you.
We can't, in this part of the process, we can't start telling you evidence and go, oh, do you remember this? And you go, no, I know, but now I know. And do you remember anything about Trayvon Martin at all, other than what you've mentioned already?
No.
Okay.
I really don't.
Sure.
I mean,
Anything about any particular witnesses that might testify or not that were discussed in court proceedings or the media talked about, there've been references to witness like, by a number as opposed to a name. Do you remember anything in particular about any particular witness?
Again, the only thing I remember are the audio tapes that you mentioned earlier, that there were some experts from the FBI, some experts from other places that were going to present something to the judge, and she was going to rule on them one way or another, or something like that.
All right. Did that impact you in any way whatsoever?
No.
Did you form any impressions like, okay, they got an FBI, they got another expert, I wonder who's telling the truth, or?
No, I just thought it was typical.
You think in every proceeding it's kind of like one side has one thing and the other side has the other, and so?
I'd say you're doing your job and the other side's doing their job, whatever.
Okay. Anything else that you can remember about the case that kind of, let me put it this way. If I were to ask you, somebody was coming from out of town to visit you and your family, and they said, hey, what's all this commotion about George Zimmerman, about Trayvon Martin? What would you tell them?
Well, the only thing we haven't discussed probably was, and I'm not sure what the right term is in Florida, but it was a stand your ground type of process.
Okay.
That had seemed to have a lot of bearing on what was going on.
Sure. Tell me what you can remember about that. What discussions, if any, were had? Obviously, you mentioned stand your ground. What discussions were had, either in arguments or in court or outside court?
Only that I thought, I seem to remember that that's what the defense, the defense may say they were using as part of the defense.
Okay. Did you come to any impressions or conclusions based on what you knew about the facts, whether it was or it wasn't, or?
Well, I don't know what the stand your ground laws, how they read, and
Okay.
and if they were to come up, I'm sure that y'all will tell us in great detail what they mean.
Sure. Okay. So you're willing to wait to actually get the law as opposed to what people have said the law is?
Yeah,
Okay.
too many times it's just the opposite,
Sure.
or
Okay.
you're being misled, I should say.
Right. Now, in addition to the media, you've also have you heard commentary from so-called legal experts or other people commenting about what the evidence is or not? Have you heard any, on CNN or Fox or even the local news? Sometimes they'll have a lawyer debating one side, lawyer debating another side, and it becomes more of these legal
Talking heads.
Yes.
I do remember those folks on the news. And
Did they make a lasting impression on you, I gather?
my impression was, how in the hell do they know? They're not in your office or their office, so where do they get all this information from?
I got you. All right. How about commentary from any of the lawyers involved in the case? You know, myself, Mr. Guy, Mr. Manti, Mr. O'Mara, Mr. West, anybody, did you remember hearing them on
Only
TV talking about the case?
Only in the fact that y'all were presenting things to the judge
Okay.
for her to make some decisions on.
I apologize, I've already asked you this, but you didn't go on you mentioned you don't mess with the internet in terms of doing research at all. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Have you visited any of the, if there are any legal websites or any kind of websites in support of one side or the other, have you visited any of those?
No,
Okay.
I didn't even know they existed.
I'm not saying that they are, but you know, there's always a cause. Okay. You briefly mentioned about the jury potentially being sequestered. The court has made a determination the jury will be sequestered. We're estimating that once we pick a jury, and we're still in the process of picking a jury, once the official trial starts, both sides have estimated that it'd be anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks, potentially. And the court has also made a determination because the court's obligation is to keep the jurors, you know, focusing on the case and not being exposed to media, et cetera, that the jury will be sequestered. Does that present an insurmountable hardship? And we realize people take, you know, time from their jobs and lives. We know it's a disruption. We're all aware that the court, you know, on both sides. The question is whether that would create such a hardship that you could not do this.
I mean, no, obviously it's an inconvenience. I have other plans, you know, coming up in a month, but, you know, can they be delayed? Sure.
Okay. If I could have a moment, Your Honor.
Yes, you may.
Let me briefly talk again about the, you mentioned the outsiders. You're not able to identify who they are, or these talking heads, or who they are one way or the other? Okay.
I'm sure at the time I would have remembered, but now I don't.
Sure, okay. How about, we mentioned the media exposure and all that. How about exposure either at work or with friends or family in terms of talking about the case? You remember anybody talking about the case?
Infrequently it comes up at work.
Okay. Did people give you their opinions? Oh, you know, this is what really happened, or, you know, this is what really happened, or everybody's lying, or everybody's telling the truth, or?
No, we didn't. We just really didn't have those discussions.
Okay. How about with family? Any discussions about the case, other than there is a case here?
Only with my wife, and she just says, I hope you don't get on the jury.
Sir, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Mr. O'Mara.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
How are you? Except for being here, how are you doing?
All right.
Good. As was sort of apparent from Mr. De Leon's questions, this part of the process is simply to find out what information you sort of bring with you to us. We call it pretrial publicity. It's just an idea of finding out what you know so that we can get that on the table, see if what you've learned has been so infectious that you can't get rid of it. So that's mainly the purpose of these questions, okay? We could limit it to one question, and that is, whatever you heard on the outside, can you promise to leave it on the outside until you hear it from a witness or see it in evidence?
Absolutely. I mean, to me, that's the way it has to be.
And that's really the primary question. Of course, as lawyers, what we try and do then is drill into that a little bit to make sure that what you do know about it, we know that you know about it. So I want to ask some questions about that. For example, you mentioned that CBS is sort of your go-to station for news on TV?
I'd say more accurately, it's my wife's.
Okay. Did you notice any particular bias or side that they may have been taken in the media from your perspective of viewing it?
Well, I would say the only bias I see in it, all three stations, NBC, CBS, whatever, kind of have a anti-gun atmosphere to them.
Okay.
You know,
How is that apparent to you?
just in how they present news throughout the, you know, the nation, what's happening, you know, how they maybe emphasize certain things over others.
Anything specific to this case?
No.
And you said that you don't do any real internet research, nothing on Facebook or Twitter or anything like that?
Absolutely not.
Do you ever go on it just to see what other people are saying?
No. It's just not something I do.
And you mentioned about your vague memory is that it was an event that happened where somebody was shot.
Correct.
Anything more about the people involved, that being George Zimmerman or Trayvon Martin?
Only that it's a news reported it, there was a struggle, and then just, I guess then somehow there was a discharge of a firearm and the boy was killed.
Okay. Will you say, earlier you said that he was young. Did that concept you just mentioned now, that it was a boy who was killed, did you notice in the reporting that it was presented to you as either Trayvon Martin being younger than George Zimmerman, or there being some category difference between the two?
He was younger, yes.
Okay. Did you,
Like much younger, I would think, you know.
did you get a feel for how old he was from the reporting?
Again, there was a whole lot of, at the beginning, it was, in my mind, what I remember, there was a bunch of different things. You know, he could have been anywhere from 18 to 25. Today, right now, I wouldn't have a clue how old he was.
Okay. Would you again agree to defer, rather than to what you may have heard in the media, to what you get here in the courtroom?
Absolutely.
And as Mr. De Leon said, if it's a question of some memory coming to mind different from what you hear in the courtroom, what would you default to?
The judge's orders.
Okay. She's going to tell you that though we want you to bring your common sense in the courtroom and your life experiences, that we don't want you to rely on any individual memory of the case unless you hear it from the witness stand. And is that something you'd be able to follow?
I definitely can.
Mr. De Leon asked you about your statement you made. These outside folks sort of came in and wanted Mrs. Zimmerman or George Zimmerman arrested. Tell me a little bit more about that. To the extent you remember.
The only thing I really remember, there were some civil rights, I would say, is how I would categorize those folks, came in, and then there was a march, and again, at least my understanding of their emphasis was trying to get the sheriff's office to arrest Mr. Zimmerman where he hadn't been arrested at that time.
Okay. And I think that you answered that you had no concern with their right to do so.
No.
Would not hold that against the state for it being created or the genesis of it being from a protest, would you?
No.
Okay. Nor would you hold it against Mr. George Zimmerman that he actually did get arrested and got here today before you?
Absolutely not.
Do you remember seeing any pictures at all of Trayvon Martin?
Sure.
And can you tell me about those?
No, they were just the pictures of the young man, I guess, that were in the news.
Anything that struck your mind about them that would stick with you?
No, other than that fact he was young.
Is there anything then about this case and what you've learned from the media or any sources that you think would impact negatively on your ability to sit as an impartial juror?
No.
And though you said you'd rather not be here, if called to serve on the jury, though it would be, as you said, an inconvenience, it would be something that you could, if called upon, to accomplish? You'd
Sure.
be able to do so?
If I had to, yes.
Mr. De Leon asked questions about whatever you thought you remember hearing about this case. would it cause you any concern if you didn't hear about that here in the courtroom, whatever that issue might be?
No, I mean, I can't see how it would cause any concern. I assume that you both are confident you're going to present what needs to be presented.
And you're okay with limiting your consideration to that which you get from the witness stand and the evidence?
Absolutely.
In my conversation with you now and in thinking about Mr. Del Leon's questions, anything else that comes to mind about the case that you think we should discuss now, this being sort of our last chance to talk to you about what you bring with you to the courtroom?
No.
Great. If I may just have a moment, Your Honor.
Yes, you may.
Thanks very much. No further questions. Thanks for your time.
Okay, thank you. Feel free, remain seated for just a moment. Counsel, approach when you're ready.
Your Honor, H10 is present.
Good morning. Please be seated. You are hereafter referred to, or will continue to be referred to, as juror H10. The attorneys are going to have an opportunity to ask you questions about the questionnaire you filled out Tuesday morning, and we're going to begin with Mr. De La Ronda.
May you please report?
Yes.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Mr. H10, we should call you. As Judge Nelson indicated, we're limited in this part of the jury selection process in asking you specific questions about what you remember or don't remember about the case. So we're going to prod you a little bit about that. We've had an opportunity to read your questionnaire, and you said you had never heard of George Zimmerman?
True.
Okay, and you had never heard of Trayvon Martin?
True.
And you left blank the part about what you've heard, so you haven't heard anything at all?
I'll put it like this. I don't follow the media too much.
So you don't really pay attention to what's going on in the world, or at least locally here.
No.
And you stated that you have not formed an opinion, is that correct, regarding the guilt or innocence of Mr. Zimmerman?
In one way of speaking, yes.
I'm sorry, what?
In one way of speaking, yes.
Okay. What do you mean by that?
Everybody got their belief. I'm just gonna leave it like that. You know, I can't judge. It's not for me to judge.
You don't believe you can judge at all, and is that a moral or religious grounds?
Religious.
Okay. So you don't feel that you could vote guilt or innocence in this particular case because of your religious or moral background?
Right.
Okay. I appreciate you letting us know, sir. May we approach the bench, Your Honor?
You may. Can we bring in the next juror? Nice to meet you. Thank you.
age 13 is present.
Please be seated. Good morning. Good morning. You have been and will continue to be referred to as juror H13. The attorneys will have an opportunity to ask you questions about the juror questionnaire that you filled out Tuesday morning, and we're going to begin with Mr. Deverano.
And please report. Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning.
As Judge Nelson indicated, we're limited in this part of the jury selection process in asking you questions about what you know, what you bring, in other words, from exposure to the media. And you filled out the questionnaire that we were able to read, and so I had some follow-up questions as a result of that. You mentioned that you had heard Channel 9, I guess, is your source of information?
Yes.
Okay. You've seen news coverage of the shooting, death of Trayvon Martin, and some coverage of the preliminary hearings.
A couple weeks ago.
Sure. Okay. Is that a couple of weeks ago?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Let me go back to when this happened. It happened back last year. Do you recall seeing some coverage at the time it happened back in February or subsequent to that?
I saw some coverage, yes.
Okay. What do you recall first hearing about this case?
What
do you recall, yeah, in terms of watching on TV, what do you recall first being publicized in the media about this case?
That the shooting had occurred, that it happened in Sanford, and then I really didn't follow it a whole lot until people started coming into the area.
Okay.
With protests.
Sure. Okay. Let me digress a minute and talk about in terms of the shooting. Do you remember any specific facts regarding the shooting? Who it involved? What it was?
Well, I had heard who it involved, of course, yes.
George Zimmerman and Trayvon Martin.
Correct.
Do you remember anything about where it occurred or the circumstances regarding the shooting other than it was a shooting?
I know that it occurred in an apartment complex or a condo complex. I'm not sure which it is.
Anything about the circumstances leading up to the shooting or the shooting itself?
Well, I did hear Mr. Zimmerman with a 911 call.
Okay.
And I don't know a whole lot about it. I have a lot of questions about it.
Okay. All right. What kind of questions do you have about it?
Well, I'm not sure exactly what time it even occurred, if it was dark, if Mr. Zimmerman, what prompted him to reach out to Trayvon Martin, for lack of a better word.
Okay.
I don't know. I don't know if Trayvon Martin was walking toward him or away from him, which would raise some questions for me,
Okay. So
I have a question why Mr. Zimmerman had a gun if he was doing a neighborhood watch.
Okay.
If that was something that the community where he lived, authorized that or allowed that.
Right. And you understand that this part of the process, we can't answer those questions.
I understand that, but those are questions in my mind. Yes.
Sure. And so that was based on what you saw on TV and what you, right,
Yes,
in
it
terms of the
raised
exposure
questions.
you had?
Yes.
Okay. All right. And I gather, as you stated in your questionnaire here, you have not formed an opinion as to the guilt or innocence of Mr. Zimmerman, is that correct?
I have not.
Okay. You mentioned 911 call that Mr. Zimmerman made, is that what you said?
Yes.
You listened to it, I gather?
I heard it on the
Okay.
news.
Did you only listen to it once, or did you hear it more than once?
Well, at the beginning, it was played a lot more than once.
Okay.
So I heard it more than once.
Okay. Do you remember hearing any other type of recording of any type, either
No, sir.
audio or video at all?
No, sir, not until a couple of weeks ago when I heard the pre-hearing calls with the
Okay.
tapes.
Sure. Okay. Well, let's go ahead and cover that since you mentioned it. I'm trying to keep it chronologically, but I'm going to move around
Okay.
because based on your information that you've provided so far, what do you recall about recently the pre-hearings about the calls?
Well, it was about who was calling for help, whether it was Trayvon or Mr. Zimmerman.
Okay. And do you remember, was there actually court proceedings that you heard? In other words, did you hear witnesses or did you hear the court?
No, I heard it, the court proceedings.
Okay. And Did you come to any conclusion as a result of that?
No,
Okay. Did you hear the actual call itself where there apparently were cries or yells for help by one or two people or whatever?
I did hear that
Okay.
as part of the pretrial coverage.
Okay. And did you form an opinion as a result of that?
No, sir.
Okay. So in other words, you've been exposed to obviously the media, but you would agree to abide by the court's instructions and law that anything you've heard outside the courtroom, unless it comes into evidence, you cannot consider.
Correct.
Can you agree with that?
Yes.
Okay. How about if you're picked as a juror and you're sitting and you're listening to the evidence and then you remember, hold on, this witness is saying, you know, ABC, but I remember it being DEF. You understand under the law, you cannot consider what you remember outside the courtroom.
Yes.
Do you have any issue with that at all?
No, sir.
Okay. You also mentioned that, oh, I apologize. You remember any photographs at all related to the case? Seeing that on TV or?
I do remember photographs of Mr. Zimmerman's injuries.
Okay. And did they form an impression on you when you saw those photographs?
They didn't form as much of an impression as they did again raise questions about how did this happen.
Okay, okay. Anything else about any other photographs you recall?
No. Well, I've seen Trayvon's photograph.
What do you remember the photographs of Trayvon looking like?
Well, I've seen mostly headshots.
Okay.
And
Did they form any impression in your mind?
No, sir.
Okay. Any other photographs you can recall?
no, sir.
Okay. Anything else about either George Zimmerman or Trayvon Martin that you can remember? Are you one of those individuals, you know, that we have individuals in this great country that sometimes, in terms of the media, they watch it religiously, you know, at 6 o'clock or whatever time it is now. It used to be only 6 o'clock or 6:30. Now they've got it 5 o'clock, 5:30, et cetera. Are you one of those that's just every day you watch the news, or you just periodically watch it, or?
I don't watch the news every day at 6 o'clock. I'm rarely even home from work by
Okay.
6 o'clock. I might catch some of the news like at 11 o'clock,
Sure,
and I
okay.
usually tune in for the weather for the next day. But I have a family, my
Sure.
daughter and grandsons live with me, and when I get home, it's dinner, and I don't have that much time. And actually, when I have a chance to watch TV, it's not bad news I focus on.
Okay, gotcha. How about the newspaper? Do you subscribe to the newspaper? or
I do not.
Do you read the newspaper online?
I sometimes do, but not often.
Okay. Do you remember anything in the newspaper about this case?
No, I
that
do
you read
not.
online? How about through any media, internet-type sources like Facebook or
I don't do any
YouTube?
social media.
You don't do any of that stuff at all? Okay. Let me go back to in terms of court proceedings. You said, was it recently that you talked about, other than some discussion or talk about the voice on the recording? Do you remember anything else about recent court proceedings?
No,
Okay. Do you remember any other type of evidence that you would have been exposed to or, you know, seen on TV related to this case that you can recall now?
no. I would like to clarify.
Sure.
From time to time over the last year or whatever, 14 months, whatever it was, I mean, there has been something, but I mean, nothing that has
That stands out in
left
your
an
mind?
impression.
Okay, all right. You also mentioned that, I guess what got your impression too, aside from the shooting itself and what began is, in terms of Mrs. Zimmerman's 911 call, about people started coming or something. Did I understand you correct? People started coming into town, did you say, or?
Yes.
Okay, tell me a little bit about what you recall about that.
Well, it became very high profile, and there were many protests in the area, and and I know that some very high profile politicians arrived, and
Sure.
so I know about that, but I
Right.
don't, I didn't participate.
Right, okay, well, that was my first question. So you anticipated the first
I
question?
saved you the time.
Pardon me?
I saved you the time.
Yes, ma'am, you sure did, and I appreciate that. Did you form any impressions as a result of that? Somebody from out of town coming, high-profile people or politicians or whatever, what do you think of that?
I find it unsettling.
Okay.
I guess would be the best word. It always makes me a little bit anxious when something like that happens.
Sure. Unsettling in towards that they had no business getting involved, or you're upset in one way, I guess what I'm trying to prod you a little bit in terms
I
of
think in
unsettling.
part for the community, there was a little bit of a fear factor. Would it end up in riots? Would it be peaceful demonstrations? I have colleagues that live
Sure.
in that area, in Sanford.
Sure. Did, is your understanding of what occurred, were they all peaceful, or were there any problems related to that?
As far as I know, they were all peaceful. I mean, I don't remember.
I wasn't implying that they weren't, I'm just saying I can't tell you.
I don't remember hearing anything about violence. I think they were more peaceful.
Okay. Now, some people may be of the opinion that, you know, people shouldn't do that. You know, they have no business doing that. Other people say we live in this great country, whether we agree with it or not, people have the right to free speech. Where do you fall in, if you do fall in one of those two categories?
I believe that we do live in a great country where people have the right of free speech, but I always find, I mean, I am older, obviously, and I have lived through the race riots of the 60s and subsequent riots with the Rodney King thing. I mean, it just makes me uncomfortable.
Sure.
And I don't know, you know.
Sure.
It's just that I wish that kind of thing didn't
happen.
particularly happen, and that
Okay.
people could get
Would you
along better.
hold it, I'm sorry, I interrupted.
And that people could get along better, that it wasn't racially divided at this point in my life.
Well, let's talk about, in terms, you mentioned a few things, obviously racial division, race riots, Rodney King, and that kind of stuff. Let me kind of break that up and ask you some questions related to that. Do you believe, since you mentioned it, that there still exists racial tension in society, in this great country?
Yes, sir, I do.
And do you attribute it to one group or another, or just the way it is, or how do you fall, if you do?
I just kind of attribute it to the way it is, based on other things that have happened, that, you know, that have happened.
Sure, okay. Do you believe in this case that the protests or the right to free speech in terms of people out there, you know, some politicians getting involved? I know you said you'd rather them not have gotten involved. Would you hold that against the state of Florida and the fact that we're prosecuting George Zimmerman, or the reverse of that, would you hold that against George Zimmerman?
No, I would not.
You wouldn't hold it against George Zimmerman?
No, I would not.
Now, would you hold it against the state of Florida,
No, I would
that we're
not.
prosecuting George Zimmerman?
No, I would not.
Did you come to the belief that the only reason Mr. Zimmerman is being prosecuted is because of that?
No, I don't believe that.
In other words, do you believe at this time that you can completely dissolve yourself of that? Take that completely out of the picture. If you hear no evidence at all about that there were protests, can you agree not to consider it at all?
Yes.
Okay, in other words, you're sitting as a juror, you're listening to the evidence, you go, wow, Mr. Zimmerman appears to be guilty. Or you could say he appears to be innocent, but let's say you're saying it appears he did something wrong, it appears he's guilty. But you know, I wonder if this was all because of what happened in terms of the potential stuff out there, protests.
No, it wouldn't affect me.
It would not, that would not enter your mind at all.
No.
And as you've noted, you know, people remember things. You mentioned Rodney King and all that. Do you understand that has nothing to do with this case at all?
Absolutely. I was just
Okay.
talking, you asked me about
Sure. Okay.
that, and those are events that I remember that have been racially motivated.
Sure, okay, no, I asked you, you're right. In other words, can you agree to just completely disregard all that stuff unless something comes out in the courtroom in terms of evidence? Can you agree to just disregard all that other stuff?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Do you have any doubt about that in your mind?
No doubt.
Okay. Anything else that comes to mind, and here's the way I like to ask the question of jurors in terms of publicity, is if somebody from out of town was coming, a friend of yours, they're coming to visit, and they happen to come this week, and obviously, let's pretend you're not on the jury, obviously, because you can't talk, or potentially on the jury, And they said, what's this going on? What is this court, what is this proceeding? What is this thing about George Zimmerman and Trayvon Martin? What would you tell them?
I'm not sure if I would tell them or ask them where they've been, but but I would just tell them that there was.
What would you tell them? How would you
was-
describe this?
There was a fight. There was some
Okay.
kind of an altercation between Mr. Zimmerman and Trayvon Martin.
That's my segue, hopefully, in getting into what discussions, if any, you've had with friends or family. Have you had discussions with friends or family throughout the process in terms of from back in February till now about the case?
I had minimal discussions with friends, but I have had some discussion with
Sure.
family.
I mean, tell me about minimum discussion with friends. Did any of them, suggest or assert a certain point, like Zimmerman is innocent and others say, oh, he's guilty? Did people interject their opinion while there was discussions?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Did those influence you in any way or
No,
sway
sir.
you one way or the other?
No, sir.
And
And more
those-
it was colleagues than friends. I mean, I heard it. I work a full-time job, so I
Sure.
heard it like in my office, and people had opinions, and
Right.
but their opinions aren't my opinion.
Okay. We live in a great country. Everybody's entitled to an opinion.
So,
Did you, in those discussions, state your opinion about that? Or did you just kind of remain in the background? Or did you enter the discussions and go, well, you're right about this, you're wrong about that? I mean, did you interject yourself in some way?
I think I may have interjected myself, but not about who's right and who's wrong, just that a young man died. I mean,
Sure.
yeah.
Okay. So as we sit here today, oh, I apologize, you mentioned also with family. What if any, discussions did you have with family about the case that you could recall?
Well, I have 4 grandsons, 3 of whom are teenagers, 2 of whom live with me,
Okay.
and my daughter, whose children they are.
So you've
And
got your hands
I've
full.
talked about, well, yes, I've talked about that with them, and safety issues more than anything, and about if they walk up to the corner store, which is maybe the 2 older ones, a mile, maybe give or take, from our community where we live, about safety, and just stay focused on where you're going and come back. And if anybody says anything to you, run for home. I mean,
Sure.
yeah, that kind of stuff. It's,
All right. Again, you've had those discussions with family members, your grandsons. Can you agree that that plays no role in this decision, in other words? Can you
Absolutely.
agree? Is there any doubt in your mind about that?
Absolutely, because as I said at the beginning, I had questions about how it even all happened, how it all came down, what from start to finish.
The other area that I'd like to talk to you about is, at this time, is the issue about how long this case will take. We realize people have taken times from their lives, not just in this case, any case in which we ask George to sit. We realize it in some way disrupts people's lives. But that's the only way our system works, is to allow people to come in and serve as jurors. The court has made a determination. Well, first of all, we're estimating once the jury is actually picked, it will take anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks. And the court has also made a determination because of make sure there's no issues with publicity in terms of the jurors being exposed to media, et cetera. And so that they can concentrate just specifically on the case, that the jury will be sequestered. Okay, I'm sure you've heard that already, right? Or
Yes.
heard a possibility. And I gather by your answer, you can abide by that. You can make a sacrifice, as we're asking all jurors to do, and do that?
Yes.
Okay. Tommy, have a moment, Your Honor. I did have another follow-up that I was reminded of. Regarding the protest that you mentioned, did you identify it with one side or the other? Or what did you take the protest to be?
Well, I took the protest to be outrage because a young black male had been killed. But
Okay.
how did I feel about that?
Yeah.
I just don't like that kind of mass protesting
Sure.
in general. It's just
Okay.
something that is a little scary and a bit unsettling to me.
Okay. And again, can you just completely disregard that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Mr. West?
Yes. Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Don West, one of the attorneys for Mr. Zimmerman that you see over here, and Mark O'Mara,
Yes.
and Robert Hirschhorn, who's helping us with the case at this time. And reminds me of that old Get Smart television show where people were called only by their numbers. So you are
Age 13.
Age 13. Good morning. You had mentioned just a moment ago that it's a bit unsettling for you if there is a public protest about something. Is that for any particular reason connected with this case, or just in general?
Just in general.
Did you feel that the protests in this case had a racial component?
Yes.
I understand you didn't go to any of the protests. No. Is there any reason why you didn't?
I've never been to a protest. It's not something that it's not the way I spend my time.
So regardless of how you may feel about the purpose of the protest, you would not have gone?
No, sir.
Were you aware of similar protests or rallies in other places around the country?
Regarding this case?
Yes.
No, I'm not.
Not aware of any rallies or community events connected with this case anywhere other than here in Sanford?
Correct.
Do you know anybody that may have gone to one of the rallies
No, I do
here
not.
or anywhere else? There was a petition circulating at one point in connection with the case. Did you or do you know anybody that may have signed the petition?
No, I do not.
When you talked with your grandsons, are the grandsons that live with you the teenagers?
I have 3 that live with me. 2 are teenage boys, well, obviously, and 1 6-year-old.
How old are the teenagers?
Almost 15, almost 14, and they have been with me for 13 years.
You've raised them?
Yes, well, with my daughter.
Sure. So you have a day-to-day, very close relationship with them.
Yes.
Were they aware of some of the community reaction, what you called the protest in the case?
Yes.
And did you talk with them at all about that?
I didn't talk with them about necessarily the community reaction. I would talk with them more about what they were coming home hearing from school. They were in middle school at the time.
Just every question, just so we know, every question I ask you in this part of the jury process is based upon what you know about the case in some way from the media or any other source.
Yes.
Not asking you to offer any opinion on what you might learn later, but only what you know as of today. So did you talk with your grandsons about any racial aspect of this case?
No,
Do you think there is a racial aspect to this case?
I don't know. I don't know that it was racially motivated. I don't know that. That was one of the first things I said.
Mm-hmm.
I have questions about it.
Is your sense of the rallies or the protests that they were based upon people claiming that it was?
Yes.
Do you have any information from your news sources or speaking with colleagues that would shed some light on that?
No.
Based upon what you know, obviously, do you think that George Zimmerman may have racially profiled Trayvon Martin?
I don't know that.
Do you have any information that makes you think he may have?
I don't know that. Because
course.
I'm not sure if Mr. Zimmerman knew that Trayvon Martin was black, or that's why I asked. Was it face to face? Was it, it's a question that's not answered. Did Mr. Zimmerman see Trayvon Martin face forward or walking away from him with his back to him? If he was walking away, it may be entirely different.
Do you have any information why people are saying through these demonstrations or otherwise that George Zimmerman racially profiled Trayvon Martin?
I don't have any information about that.
Is there anything that makes you think that this is a civil rights case, that there's a civil rights aspect to this case?
I do not at this point.
Do you have any sense of how many people attended the demonstrations?
No. I believe they said hundreds, but I'm not sure. I believe the news said hundreds. I'm not sure.
That's all you know of is from the news is maybe hundreds?
Well, I saw it on the news, and
Sure.
and I think I heard hundreds, and it looked like, a huge amount of people, but I don't know how many.
And of course, and all we're trying to get is your sense of it. No one would ever ask you to know that. It's just what your sense of it was. In other words, do you think it was a big demonstration or a small demonstration?
A big demonstration.
And some folks from out of town?
Yes.
Do you know who I think you described high-profile politicians. Tell me who you can remember from the news may have participated in
Reverend Al Sharpton, I believe, and I believe Jesse Jackson was at one of them.
Do you know those individuals from the media?
Well, yes.
Do you know Reverend Sharpton or Reverend Jackson to take a particular position in this case?
In this case?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
What do you think?
I
What do you know their
believe that
position?
I believe that they are of the opinion that Mr. Zimmerman shot an innocent young man.
And has that affected you in some way?
No.
Do you like those? Do you like them? Are they public persons that you follow or know much about or generally agree with?
Well, I don't know much about them. I mean, I don't live where they have been politicians of my state, or, I mean, of course I've seen them they've been around for many years, and so I've seen them often, but did I answer your question?
Right, yes, except that you generally agree with the positions that they've taken on matters.
Honestly, I don't really pay much attention to that.
You mentioned that the idea of public protests is somewhat unsettling because you have lived long enough to remember the race riots of the 60s and also the violence associated with the Rodney King case. Are you concerned that there might be similar violence, that there might be violence associated with this case?
I'm not concerned, but I would speculate that there may be.
And what do you think might trigger violence connected with this case?
A verdict that is not popular to those who are protesting.
And in this instance, what do you think that verdict would be that might trigger violence in the community?
I mean, what do I think the verdict would be? I believe what would trigger the violence is
Yes.
if Mr. Zimmerman was not found guilty. That would trigger the violence, or not violence, but protests.
Are you concerned that a not guilty verdict might trigger violence in this case?
Well, I'm not sure it would be violent, but I believe it could be protesters, minus the violence, just people who want to be heard.
Are you concerned then for yourself?
No, sir.
If you were to sit on this jury and return a verdict of not guilty, are you concerned about your own safety
No,
in any
sir.
way? Why not?
I don't believe that any harm would come to me from sitting on the jury. And I can't recall of any juror I ever heard where, in high-profile cases, where a juror has been attacked or harmed. Of what I've heard, I'm not concerned.
Do you feel that the risk of there being further protests or even violence connected with a verdict of not guilty might in your way shape the way you viewed the evidence, or perhaps shape the way that you might vote?
No. I do not.
Are you comfortable and convinced of that?
Yes, sir.
You don't have any reservations, I take it, and that you could vote not guilty in this case without any concern for what the consequences of a not guilty verdict might mean to the community?
To the community?
Right.
Could you repeat the top of the question? Would I be concerned of if a not guilty verdict, was that correct?
Yes.
What it would do to the community?
Right. Yes.
Well, yes, I would be concerned about that, but I think it would, like everything else, it just would go away. It eventually would go away.
Would it be more difficult for you to vote not guilty if you thought that verdict might trigger violence in the community?
No, sir.
Why not?
Because I consider myself to be a person of reason and a fair person, and I have, like I said at the top, a lot of questions, and I would base my decision on the answers to those questions. I don't know every detail of this. I know really minimal details of this, so it's what would be presented to me that would make my decision.
Are you concerned at all about George Zimmerman being able to get a fair trial based upon what you know from the media and your concern that there might be violence if he's acquitted?
Objection as to misrepresenting what the juror said.
She said there may be some reaction, but I don't know that she had the concern of violence, so you may want to ask that question again.
Sure. Yes, I'm sorry if I mischaracterized it. I thought that one of your concerns was that there might be protests and there could be violence. You just can't predict what might happen.
Correct.
Okay. So based on that, are you concerned at all about George Zimmerman being able to get a fair trial based upon what's been talked about in the community, as well as your sense that a not guilty verdict could lead to protest and perhaps violence?
I am not concerned that he would not get a fair trial.
This is so hard for me when people start handling this. I'm sorry. I lost my train of thought for a second. May I have just a moment? Patience. And I'm sorry that you're on the spot right here, and thank you for bearing with us. Obviously, you've said you still have lots of questions about this case. You don't know, for example, whether there may have been some racial component to the case? You don't know whether, well, for example, whether George Zimmerman approached Trayvon Martin or the other way around.
I believe George Zimmerman approached Trayvon Martin, but yes, I believe he did.
What makes you think that? Can we just focus on that for a moment? I guess I should also say, when in the sequence of events are you thinking that George Zimmerman approached Trayvon Martin?
If I'm understanding you correctly, I believe that Mr. Zimmerman approached Trayvon Martin to find out what he was doing at the community where they were.
What's your sense of how that happened, and when and where did George Zimmerman approach Trayvon Martin?
Well, I know that Trayvon was walking through that community, that complex, and Mr. Zimmerman was doing a community watch, and I believe called out to him.
As in yelled at him or something verbal to Mr. Martin?
Yes.
What's your source of information on that? Any, or just your impression?
I mean,
of what you heard?
No, I believe that was what I heard when it very first occurred,
Okay.
16 or 17 months ago.
Sure, and I know that none of us can keep all of that straight, so that's why we're sort of just taking a look at what people's senses are. Your sense of this case is that George Zimmerman saw Trayvon Martin in the neighborhood and approached him and asked him what he was doing?
Yes.
And
Or called to him, or called out to him.
Uh-huh.
I don't know if he actually approached him, but called out to him.
And what's your sense of what happened after that?
I honestly don't know what happened after that. I know there was the 911 call, and I don't know what transpired. I know at some point there had to have been an altercation between the two of them because Mr. Zimmerman was injured. But I don't know how that all happened.
When you say 911 call, let's be sure we're thinking of the same thing. Are you talking about a call that Mr. Zimmerman placed?
Yes.
Okay. And what's your recollection of when that took place in the sequence of events?
I don't know the exact timeline, but I believe that the initial call Mr. Zimmerman made was more at the beginning. At the beginning, when he called 911 to say there was someone in the neighborhood that didn't belong there, however it was said.
Okay. You've actually heard that call?
Yes, sir.
Have you formed any impressions about what happened based upon what was in the call?
No, I have not.
Have you heard any discussion whether or not George Zimmerman followed Trayvon Martin after being told not to do that?
I heard that.
What did you hear about that?
I heard that he was told not to by the dispatcher, and he did follow him.
What was your impression on that?
I don't have an impression because I don't know what motivated him to follow him. I don't know.
Are you assuming it's so awkward for both of us to be sorting through this, but I do want to focus that for just a second. Have you decided in your own mind that in fact that happened, that George Zimmerman followed Trayvon Martin after being told not to do that?
I believe that he did.
How strongly or firmly do you hold that opinion?
Well, I believe that he did because I don't know what happened after that. I mean, I don't know what the sequence of events were. I don't know.
What I'm focusing on now is actually a small part of that.
Okay.
What makes you, what's your source of information, or whether it's the news or conversations with colleagues or what have you, or just your own sort of analysis? What makes you convinced, if that's not too strong a word, that George Zimmerman followed Trayvon Martin after being told not to do that?
Well, what convinces me is that Trayvon Martin has died. So something happened after that because it hadn't happened, I guess, at the time that the initial 911 call was placed.
So you are convinced, I take it, if I'm hearing you correctly, that George Zimmerman disobeyed a directive of the police not to follow Trayvon Martin?
I did hear that. I mean, I don't know that that forms an opinion, but I do believe,
That's what you believe at this point, do you?
at this point in time, because I haven't heard anything else.
Does that make you think then that George Zimmerman did something wrong?
Not necessarily.
If you think that he disobeyed a police officer by following Trayvon Martin,
Okay, I understand. Yes.
does that make
Then
you-
he did. Yes, I misunderstood. Yes.
is there anything else about the calls? Well, I used calls. The call that Mr. Zimmerman made that stands out in your mind other than this issue of following?
No.
How about some of the language that was that Mr. Zimmerman used in the call? Do you remember any of the language he used, any of the descriptors?
No, I just remember him saying that someone was walking through the complex that looked suspicious, maybe on drugs. I heard that. I don't remember anything beyond the officer saying you don't need to follow him.
You don't remember anything Mr. Zimmerman may have said about the person, Trayvon Martin, or any way he may have described the person that he was?
No.
How about the other call, if you are aware of any other calls? For example, are you aware of any of the calls made by residents in the community to 911?
The call that was made where you could hear somebody screaming for help. I'm aware of that. I don't
Okay.
know who placed that call.
Let's just talk about that for a moment. What's your memory of that call and how it fits into the case?
Well, I just know that someone called and there was screaming for help in the background, but I don't remember who placed that call,
Okay.
or if it was concluded who was screaming. That's the only call that I'm aware of. Mr. Zimmerman's and whoever called about the altercation and someone screaming for help.
Have you heard that call or parts of that call yourself on the news?
The call for help?
Yes, the call that contains that.
I've heard, I honestly don't remember who I heard making that call, but I do remember calls for help.
Let me, it doesn't matter in my conversation with you today who made the call. So it doesn't matter whether you remember, and there's no reason why you would, because that's never been released publicly.
Okay.
So, but I am more interested though in the content of the call that you heard. What did you hear in the call, and what impression did it make on you?
I don't know what was said. I just remember that. I don't know remember what was said. I just remember that there was screaming for help, and that some call, and I'm not sure if it was that one. Someone said that a gunshot had been fired, and that's all I know. I don't know who was placing the calls.
Did you hear something that you characterized as cries for help?
Yes, I heard somebody screaming help on the telephone call.
Did you form any impression or opinion as to who that was?
No, sir. I don't
Have
know
you
who
heard?
that was.
I'm sorry?
I don't know who that was. I
Oh.
don't have an impression.
That's my comment, though, is not that, obviously you don't know who that was, but did you form any impression or get any sense of listening to it and then hearing the news in connection with it, who that was screaming for help?
No, I don't. No.
Have you heard any news discussion about who that was?
Well, I've heard a couple of opinions that happened, I think, recently, where one would say it was Mr. Zimmerman and the other would say it was Trayvon Martin.
What can you tell me about that? Are you talking about recent news connected specifically with ongoing aspects of the case?
Well, a couple weeks ago for the pretrial that I spoke about.
That's what I'm asking, just a little more information on. Did you watch some of the proceedings on TV?
No, sir.
From what source did you get information about that aspect of it?
On the news, when just a brief shot on the news, I heard it.
Do you have Channel 13 at home?
Yes.
Do you ever watch Channel 13?
I never watched Channel 13. Channel 13, the all the time news, is
Yeah.
that what you, no,
Yeah.
I
You never use that as a
Never.
source for news?
don't. Never.
And is it just Channel 9 for local news?
Primarily, it's just Channel 9. Maybe on the weekend, I might watch, I'm not even sure what channel it is, Channel 5 perhaps, there's a male newscaster on the weekend, but if Channel 9 News is running something that's going over time, I might watch it a little bit, but I don't have to watch the news every night. I mean, I'm an avid reader and I have other things to do in my home, so I'm not glued to a particular newscast, you know what I mean?
Do you remember your source of information about the proceedings in connection with the voice issue?
I heard that on Channel 9. That I can be pretty clear about. That pretrial hearings were taking place, and that there were cries for help, and it was trying to be determined there were some experts, I believe, that were questioned, and it was trying to be determined who was crying for help.
And what do you remember the experts saying, if anything? And I know you didn't hear them say it, but what was the description of what had happened that you heard?
I don't know what the description of what had happened. I don't know that.
Did you learn whether there were experts who had reached an opinion on whose voice it was?
I believe that there were a couple of experts and each had a different opinion.
Great. As one might think often happens, but what do you know about the experts' opinions, or who's
Really?
Experts and that sort
Really,
of thing?
I really don't know all of those details. I mean, I can't even address that.
Are you, is your sense of it that there are experts that have reached an opinion about whose voice it is?
I don't recall. I don't recall a definitive opinion. I really don't. So I can't. I guess the answer would be no.
I don't think I understood. Are you saying that you don't?
You asked if I. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Are you saying that you don't know if any of the experts disagreed with each other?
I believe the two experts. I think there were two experts I heard, and they disagreed. But
Do you know do you know what the experts agreed on or disagreed on?
no, sir, I didn't.
Do you know that there were only two experts involved?
I think. Well, I think there were two. I mean, I remember two, but I don't remember any others.
And what do you remember the two that you can think of said, or what their opinions were?
I honestly didn't even, I honestly didn't take it seriously. I don't know. I believe they disagreed, but I don't know what they said. If I had realized I was summoned for this, I would have paid closer attention.
This isn't a test, by the way, but thank you.
I honestly, I don't remember. I mean, I can be watching the news and I can have several other things going through my head at the same time. Like work the next day, or what happened that day, or what bill needs to be paid, or, I mean, you know, I have a lot of things on my mind, so I honestly, I don't remember. I believe that they differed in opinions.
All right. You made the comment that you didn't take it seriously, and I know you're saying that it wasn't of particular importance to you. Is that what you're really saying?
When I say I didn't take it seriously, I'm not talking about the trial. I mean, at the time, it wasn't something that I sat and studied every word that they were saying. That's what I meant by seriously. I mean, I may have heard it, but I wasn't really even absorbing it. I mean, because I had other things I was thinking about.
Based upon your knowledge of the case up to that point, did you think who was screaming on the recording was an important issue in the case?
Yes.
And from what you heard in the news, are you saying that you believe there are experts who said they can identify whose voice it is?
I honestly, I'm trying to remember. I think that one of the experts might have said that there was some confusion and couldn't identify, but I'm not sure.
Can you remember what any other expert may have said? Do you know which, and I'll use the term sides, do you know which side had which expert's opinion? Do you know if any expert claims to have identified the voice as that of Trayvon Martin?
I believe I heard one expert say it was Trayvon and one expert say it was George Zimmerman.
Did you in any way attempt to get a sense of these experts, whether you thought they were believable or qualified or in some way knew what they were talking about?
No, sir, I didn't pay close enough attention to that.
Do you have any feel for that now?
No, sir.
Have you any sense of whether or not, based upon what you heard in connection with the expert part of this, whether it was more likely Trayvon Martin or more likely George Zimmerman that was crying out for
I
help?
don't object, it's been asked and answered.
I have no idea.
You-
It's been answered again.
Thank you. You haven't then tried to figure out for yourself how you felt about this?
About the cry for help?
Yeah.
No, sir.
Have you talked with anybody in your family or at work about this aspect of the case?
No, sir.
No one's mentioned to you that they heard the call and wondered whether that was Trayvon Martin or
No, sir.
George Zimmerman?
No one has mentioned that.
Have you mentioned that you are raising are they all boys, all three?
Yes, yes. 3 grandsons live with me and 1 grandson lives out of state.
Have you talked with your daughter about her views of the case?
Her views of the case?
Mm-hmm.
Well, yes, I have talked with her.
And what are her views that she's expressed to you?
Well, I mean, her views, I believe, are much like my views. We don't know how it all transpired. And we just are, I mean, we were concerned. We were concerned as a mother and a grandmother about a kid, a teenager, going to the store and something, you know, tragically happening on the way back from a store.
Mm-hmm.
And her view about that is the same as mine. We just worry about the safety of these kids, and kids have a way of doing things. So we've been trying to tell them, don't, you know, to don't be flip and don't talk back and don't, you know, stuff like that. But the other thing is that if it was nighttime, my daughter did express if it was nighttime, and if it was dark, and if Trayvon was wearing a hoodie, and if he had long pants, which I don't know if he did or not, if he was walking away, I mean, could you tell if he's, you know, a white boy walking home from the store like my grandsons would, who would wear a hoodie if they're cold and would wear jeans, and who would see them from the back? I mean, there's just we have questions, and we haven't, you know, her feeling is much like mine. We haven't really formed an opinion. We just feel very badly for any family who loses a teenage child. So we feel very badly for the Martin family, but we're open to how did this happen. You know, we wouldn't want to see anybody lose their teenage child. So.
Oh,
So it's,
Do
we are
you
2
think-
women raising 3 boys, my daughter and I, so we, you know, we may be a little bit overprotective at times.
Do you think that George Zimmerman may have jumped to a conclusion? Is that what you're suggesting, that he just assumed something that he didn't know whether or not it was true based upon what you've heard in the media?
I'm going to object to an improper question, suggesting the answer is Susan.
I'm not sure I am.
There's been an objection that I need to rule upon. Just
Oh, I'm
give me a
sorry.
moment, that's okay. I think we're getting way off field here, so if you'll please bring it back into what opinion she may have formed based upon what you read or saw in the meeting.
Based upon what you've read and seen in the media, and what you said about your conversations with your daughter and your grandsons, you have a question in your own mind whether or not George Zimmerman may have racially profiled Trayvon Martin?
Yes, I have a question, whether he was racially profiled.
And do you think that that's possible, that he may have?
I don't know that until I know if he even saw Trayvon Martin's face or hands behind a hoodie and pants. I mean, I don't know. If it was dark and Trayvon was walking, and I don't know that he would have known whether he was white or black or any other color.
I've noticed a few times that you've called George Zimmerman Mr. Zimmerman, and that you've always referred to Trayvon Martin as Trayvon. Why is that?
I don't know. Just because I'm accustomed, I guess, to calling teenagers by their first name and an adult more by Mr. or Ms. I mean, there was no intent on that.
Well, do you know how old Trayvon Martin was at the time of his death?
I believe 17. 17, I believe.
Still a minor.
Yes, sir.
I know that you usually don't read the Orlando Sentinel. Have you read any stories about this case in the Sentinel?
I have not up until a week ago, or a couple weeks ago on a Friday. I happened to see it and just glanced at it in a store where the front page was about the jury selection. And I did glance at that. And as I said, it was before I realized that that was what I was being summoned for.
So that's not a source of news anywhere, even if you don't subscribe yourself. It's not like you read it at work
No, sir.
regularly. Have you had any discussions about the case at any social organizations you may belong to?
No.
Or at church?
No, sir.
Do you have any family members that belong to churches in Sanford?
No, sir.
I know your daughter lives with you and the boys, but do you have other family here in Zimmerman County area?
No. I have a child in Georgia, and my next closest family would be my brothers, who were in Massachusetts and Seattle, Washington.
Have they tried to get a better understanding of the case from you?
No.
Saying, hey, what's this all about?
No. No.
It mentioned early on that from what you know about the case, you believe that George Zimmerman followed Trayvon Martin after being told not to. And did I hear that right?
Yes.
And are you, I'll just for lack of a better phrase, are you open to the possibility that it didn't happen that way?
That he didn't follow him.
That he didn't follow him after being told not to.
I don't know that I could be open to that, because I believe that whatever transpired and after that was after the call. But my timeline might not be correct, but so I'm not sure that I could be open to that. I think everything happened after that call.
There was a comment that you made early on about a question that you had about the case. And it was, why did George Zimmerman have a gun if he was on neighborhood watch?
Mm-hmm.
That's obviously something that kind of stands out in your mind. What's your thinking on that?
Well, I just have the question of why did he have it? I mean, I have lived in communities where there is a neighborhood watch, but we don't have someone in our neighborhood that's out with a gun, you know, checking the property. I mean, if a neighbor sees something, we have a direct contact with our local police department where there's an intermediary officer that will respond to a concern. You know, it's not our property president or anything like that. There's an officer that does. So, I mean, I just wonder, why did he have a gun? Was that something that he was authorized to do, or, you know, that he chose to do?
Mm-hmm. You believe that George Zimmerman was actively engaged in some kind of patrolling for neighborhood watch when this happened?
That was my understanding, was that he was a neighborhood watchman, yes.
And have you formed the opinion or impression, at least, that he was sort of on duty, that he was actively patrolling the neighborhood when this happened?
Yes.
And you're wondering why somebody would, in that situation, be in possession of a firearm?
Well, yes, it was something that I hadn't heard of, where there were neighborhood watches, yes.
Did that make you think that in some way George Zimmerman was violating policy or procedure of neighborhood watch?
I didn't even think about that. I didn't question their policy or procedure.
You just never heard of such a thing?
Yes, sir.
Fair enough, sure. Do you think there was anything wrong with George Zimmerman having a firearm on his person?
Well, again, I don't know if that was the way they patrol their neighborhood. I mean, whoever the neighborhood watches, do they carry guns? I don't know that.
Well, if we might just for a moment, let's separate that out. Let's not speculate as to what the rules or procedures might be for neighborhood watch and just talk about George Zimmerman. Do you think he did something wrong, or that it was wrong or inappropriate for him to be in possession of a firearm?
Objection, Your Honor, has been asked and answered.
Sustained.
Now, I would request permission to develop this just a little bit further. This is an issue
It's
that's
been developed almost the past half hour, so sustain the objection.
Thank you, Your Honor. Did you hear anything in the news whether George Zimmerman's possession of the firearm was legal or illegal?
I believe I heard that it was legal.
Do you have any feeling that it wasn't in some way?
I don't think I ever heard anything after that. You know, I think I heard that it was legal, and I don't recall hearing anything else, so I never gave it any more thought.
do you have an opinion about the firearm? And by being in possession, legal possession of a firearm, while engaged in some capacity as neighborhood watch, that George Zimmerman was doing anything wrong?
Objection, ask and answer.
May we approach, Your Honor?
Yes, you may approach.
almost finished, I promise.
No problem.
Thank you. Let me look at all these Post-its for a second.
No problem.
I'll be very narrow with this question. Based on anything you've heard in the media in connection with the publicity of this case, have you heard anything, any comments on whether George Zimmerman carrying a firearm that night was in some way illegal or wrong?
I did not hear any, I don't recall any comments on that.
Any further, your thoughts are just based upon your own opinions or impressions?
My own question.
Not based upon what you've heard in the media? Okay, fair enough. Then I'm going to just bounce around a couple of places, so bear with me if it's not clear, just let me know. Have your, the co-workers that have expressed opinions about the case to you, are you in an office setting?
Yes, sir.
So are you able to talk freely with co-workers throughout the day?
Well, we all have our own space where we work, but
Sure.
we do intermingle at times throughout the day, yes.
What opinions have your co-workers expressed to you about the case?
Well, I think, I mean, it hasn't not been talked about a whole lot, but I think with a couple of, their opinions may have changed from the beginning until now, and I think when, with a couple others, they definitely did not.
Could you briefly describe just where it started and where it wound up, if it was different?
Yes, I have in my office three black colleagues, and they were absolutely, they were convinced right from the start that that it was racially motivated and racial profiling. I'm sorry. And then I have a couple of other.
Let me stop you there for a moment. Did the opinions of those co-workers ever change over time?
Well, it hasn't been discussed for a while, because it was a while ago that it happened, so it's not talked about at all now, or very infrequently that I've heard. It may be talked about when I haven't heard it. And their opinions have not changed.
Okay. Is there another faction, if you will, at work?
There are a couple of other ladies that have felt that it wasn't racial profiling, and that they don't. I've heard them say that they don't know if Mr. Zimmerman is, he may be innocent of this. We don't know what happened.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned that there were some co-workers, if I heard you correctly, that had one position early on that then may have changed a bit over time. Could you give me an example of that?
I think as they heard more, I mean, I can't speak for them, but I think as they heard more, they may have wavered some on their opinions. But I've got to say that I don't very much get involved in all of that with work. I mean, I hear it, and I don't take issues really with those who are staunch that it was a racial thing. I mean, my youngest grandson is biracial, so when we wake up in the morning, we don't look at the color of people, we just look at people. You know what I'm saying? So I avoid that conversation. So when I would hear it kicking up, I kind of walk away from it because it's not anything that I choose to get myself involved in.
Is this the grandson that lives with you?
He's 6.
If you were on this jury, and after the presentation of the evidence by the state, that you weren't convinced that the state had proved its case beyond a reasonable doubt, which under the law means your verdict would have to be not guilty. You generally understand that?
Yes, sir.
And if you were to decide, along with the other jurors, that the state hadn't proven its case and the proper verdict is not guilty, would you be able to return that verdict?
Of not guilty, yes. If it's proven that, yes.
Would you require Mr. Zimmerman to prove his innocence?
Objection, Your Honor, we're way beyond right now the manner that we're.
That's part of regular voir dire and not the purpose of this individual voir dire, so I'm going to sustain the objection.
One last question then. If you were on the jury and you found Mr. Zimmerman not guilty, based upon the opinions expressed by your coworkers, those in particular that feel very strongly that George Zimmerman is guilty, that Trayvon Martin was racially profiled, and after the case, you didn't think that in fact you believed that the state hadn't proven its case, that George Zimmerman is not guilty of murder, would it be hard for you to face the coworkers and say, I did my job?
No, it would not be hard for me to do that.
Do you have any kind of personal relationship with any of your coworkers that would make it difficult for you?
To make that decision?
Right.
Absolutely
Or difficult
not.
to face, if you will?
Absolutely not. I've worked, many of us have been with the company for a number of years, and I'm very, I don't get involved in that at all. I'm very independent, and I have my own thoughts, and just, I don't let them sway me, and I'm not concerned I'm not concerned how they would feel about me. They are my friends, and I work with them every day, but I'm my own person, so
You wouldn't have any trouble after the verdict talking with them and saying, you're wrong, that's not the way it was?
Asked and answered, and again, beyond the scope of.
I'll allow her to ask that one question. Answer the one question you may answer.
I'm answering. May I have the question again?
After the verdict, if you found George Zimmerman not guilty, it wouldn't be difficult for you to talk to those jurors that so strongly, those co-workers that so strongly believed that George Zimmerman is guilty, to say, you're wrong, it wasn't like that, that's not what the evidence was?
I hope that I wouldn't have to have any discussion about it if I was a juror and my jury duty was done. I hope I could just return to my job, and that would be the end of my service with it, but I would not have a problem saying you're wrong, if that's what you're asking.
All right. Thank you very much.
If you'll still remain seated, and counsel, when you're ready, approach.
Juror H13, thank you very much, and if you'll please follow Deputy Demps. And we're going to take about a 10-minute recess. Please be seated. Are we ready to bring in our next potential juror?
Yes,
State?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, let's go ahead and bring him in.
Your Honor, H18.
Please be seated. Good morning. You have been and you'll continue to be referred to as juror H18. The purpose of the questioning this morning is to go over the questionnaire that you filled out on Tuesday morning, and the attorneys will be asking you questions about that. So, Mr. De La Ronda will begin.
Okay, please report. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
As Judge Nelson indicated, we're limited in this part of the jury selection process, asking you questions about your knowledge of the case and that kind of stuff. I had an opportunity to read your questionnaire here. You stated you had heard of George Zimmerman, you had heard of Trayvon Martin. You also stated that you were new to Florida. How long have you been in Florida?
About 3 years now.
2 or 3 years?
2 or 3 years.
Okay. And you heard about the names of the people talking about it, you mentioned?
Yeah, people talks.
Like at work or at?
I work and I guess around. Huh?
Okay. And you don't know much about the case because you don't really follow the news, you don't watch?
I don't watch TV.
At all?
At all.
How about the news?
Netflix.
Netflix, okay.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that in terms of you're a business owner, and so you've got enough stuff at work to keep you busy, I guess.
I believe when that happened, I opened my business back in March.
Let me interrupt you a second. We know where you work,
I'm
but
sorry.
we're not publicizing. You
I'm
can if you
sorry.
want to, but we're
I
on
tried to do
purpose
that.
not.
Yeah, it was about the same time probably. So I was
Okay.
pretty busy.
Okay. All right, so let's talk about what you remember from just people talking about it, I guess at work or family and stuff. What do you recall about the case?
There was a young guy, the young man, Mr. Trevor. I believe he got. Or what I heard was he was shot on a by neighborhood watch is what it's called, and I believe it was a big stir about it. That's all I heard. It was a big stir. I know there was some protests going on, things like that, but basically it was a lot of. Or what I heard was about a lot of talking about it. Specifics I couldn't tell you about it, you know.
Okay. And now you don't watch any news at all, even like Spanish or anything like that?
No, sir.
All right. And on the radio, in the work and all that, you didn't hear anything about the case on the radio?
I just recently started to listen to music in the radio, but usually I used to play more CDs and stuff like that.
Okay.
Yeah. Now I found a good station, 98 point something, and that's what I was
Okay.
listening to
Okay.
lately.
All right. Okay. So around the time it happened, you don't really remember other than somebody got shot, a young guy got shot, and then
In Sanford.
in Sanford, and you said something about, did you say neighborhood watch or something to that?
Yeah,
effect?
so that was it was a neighborhood watch, the one that did it,
Right.
and it
You
was-
remember anything other than that?
I would like to be able to say more, but it's all what I heard was that comments from people. This just the way it happened. The guy was
Right.
walking back from the store,
Okay,
and that's basically he was walking back from the store,
right.
and I guess he got shot during that time. Something happened.
Did the people that were talking about it, did they give you their opinions about what they thought about the case?
I think everybody was giving opinions back
Okay.
then. I mean, I'm listening to everybody talking,
Sure.
but
You didn't
really.
form an opinion of that in terms of what happened?
I don't.
Okay,
Politics and religion, I don't know that
okay,
stuff.
sure. How about the people that were giving you opinion, were they all one-sided or were they on both sides? In terms of that they say Mr. Zimmerman was guilty or Mr. Zimmerman was innocent? Did they express an opinion?
On those terms, I don't think I heard anything. It was more about what happened and what.
Okay.
I think it was more talking about the police. What I heard, you know.
What do you remember them talking about the police?
No, all what I heard was like they arrested the person or they didn't arrest it, but it was a lot of stuff talked about that, and I believe that's what sparked the protest. I guess that's what.
Sure.
So I heard a lot about that, of
Right,
course.
right. What do you remember hearing about the protests?
Well, people making it a racial issue, but you know how the media is.
Did you come to any conclusion about whether it was or not?
No, I don't.
Okay. Do you just try not to get involved in that kind of stuff?
Like I said, where it's politics, religion, and race, I just don't get involved in any of that stuff.
You were not involved in the rallies or protests, whatever you
No.
want to call it, is that correct?
No.
Did you hear anything other than from the people at work talking about it? Did you hear any other, like on TV or anything about that?
I believe one time in that station, I heard somebody asking about the hoodies and stuff like that. But
About the what?
the hoodies.
The hoodies?
Yeah.
Okay.
But it was people. I guess it was just a consensus. I mean, people were asking about it,
Okay.
or the station was asking
Right.
people. But I don't really remember.
Did you form an opinion as a result of
No.
that one way or the
No.
other? People shouldn't wear hoodies or they should or anything like that?
No.
Okay,
No.
all right. Anything else? You remember any photographs at all?
No.
People talking about photographs. How about people talking about recordings or anything like that?
No. I think the first time I saw Mr. Zimmerman, I think was here.
In
That's-
court?
Yeah.
Okay. I know you didn't come to court, but I'm just saying you saw him on TV.
Actually, the day I came here, he introduced himself, I guess.
He introduced himself.
They introduced.
Oh, you're talking about down in proceedings.
Down,
I
yes.
apologize. Okay.
Yeah.
What I meant is you had not seen court proceedings before that day.
No, I didn't even know that was here for this.
Okay. So you got the jury summons. Did you get excited and say, I need to brush up on the law or anything like that?
Actually, I thought I was being brought to court for something I did.
Okay.
I was like, what did I do? You know. I
So
didn't
you
know.
clarified that you were just being summoned as a juror.
I never been in this duty, so I don't.
Sure.
I
Okay.
didn't know.
So this is your first experience in the jury process?
Yeah, it's been pretty long too.
All right. I'm sorry?
No, it's been pretty long. I didn't know what to
Okay.
expect.
You understand that we all, as citizens of this great country, give up certain things in terms of being able to participate.
I understand that now. Yeah.
Okay. And that's the only way our system works. You know, we ask people to take time from their jobs and et cetera to service as
Yes, sir.
citizens, as jurors. You remember anything else about this case at all?
Not really, just a lot. I mean, I hear people talking, but it's really, as a business owner, I mean, I hear all kinds of stuff. You know, I'm an operator also, so I manage my business and I work as a mechanic by myself. You know, I'm inside the shop.
Okay, okay. Have you heard, besides people at work or other stuff, talking about the case, about with family at all? Any discussion with family about the case?
No, my family came here. My family came here not long ago. They were back home, Puerto Rico, and they just came not long ago.
Okay.
And really, we don't really talk things like this at home. I mean, and my mom and my dad, they're not pretty good at the English, you know. So
Right.
just like me, they're not good. So
Gotcha. How about listening to anybody commenting about the case? When I'm talking about, you know, they have now people on TV talking about what the law is or what the facts are. Did you hear any commentary?
not really.
Okay.
Since I don't watch TV, I really don't.
I know you watch Netflix. Do you watch any TV channels at all, like Fox, CNN,
No.
CBS, NBC, ABC? I think I've named
Not really.
most
In my show, we just play videos, so
Okay.
We don't even have cable at work. I mean, we have the computer for work.
Sure.
And so really not.
How about, did you do any, like Facebook or any of that stuff? Sometimes they put news stuff. You don't mess with Facebook at all?
I see my Facebook maybe once every other day, and it's usually pictures.
Okay.
I got a lot of friends in the Middle East, and that's how they
Sure.
communicate with me.
Oh, okay. How about through YouTube and any of that stuff? Have you looked at any of the YouTubes? What I'm saying is if there's any stories in YouTube or any of those type of social media that you might have just even glancing looked at the case.
Not through YouTube at all, no, not really.
Nothing at
YouTube,
all?
I use it, but it's more for, I usually play comedy and stuff like that, just
Okay.
watch funny stuff.
Okay. So you have not come across anything related to this case, at least that,
Not really.
that has made an impression on you, or
Not
you
really.
recall? Okay. So I gather as you sit here today, like you stated in your questionnaire, you have not formed an opinion as to the guilt or innocence of Mr. Zimmerman. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So you can keep an open mind and listen to the evidence that actually comes out of the courtroom and make your decision on that evidence and the law, and obviously you can use your common sense too. Can you do that?
Of course.
Okay. The other part is, you know, as we talked about briefly, we ask jurors to come from their everyday jobs, you know, business owners, workers, whatever, and we ask them to serve as jurors, and that means they're giving up in terms of it's going to impact their lives, disrupt their normal life. But that's the only way our system can work, as you realize. So it's not you're realizing. And so what we ask is that they do that. And what we've come to the conclusion, estimating that this case will take anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks potentially. And the judge has also determined so that the jurors are not exposed to media in terms of the jurors being sequestered. Your contact with the outside world will be limited. And we realize it makes an impact on everybody, but we ask people to give up that in order to be able to, for this system to work. You understand that?
Yeah.
Okay. And I gather that will not be a insurmountable hardship. We know it's a hardship for everybody, but at the point of, you know, you just cannot do it, you know, for whatever.
Maybe 2 weeks now, but maybe like as I say, I'm an owner and an operator, so I do work as a mechanic, and my time is money. I'm sorry. You know, I don't want to.
Okay. So you believe that that this will impact you severely in terms of not being able to concentrate on the case and giving it the time it deserves?
If it's a long process, they will cut my income for yeah. Of course, it will create a. I mean, I produce. You know, as I'm there, I work. I depend on my own work. It's 2 owners to the business, so he will be on his own as it is today. I mean, maybe in these days I've been going back and forth.
Sure.
I've been working. I get out of here, I go down and work for the rest of the day. So that has helped. But if I have to be away for a while, yeah, it will probably impact in a negative way.
Well, you're the only one that knows how much of an impact, because we realize every juror is impacted somewhat.
Yeah.
I mean, unless you're, you know, but they either through family, even people who retired, it impacts them because they've got to take care of kids or whatever. They've got a life.
Mm-hmm.
And so the question is it that the impact so severe that you just cannot do it?
As I say, if the process is long, yeah, it will impact. It will create a hardship on my side. Yeah.
Okay. Do I have a moment, Your Honor?
Yes,
All right. May we approach the bench, Judge?
ma'am. You may proceed.
Morning, sir. How you doing? A couple of questions, and I want to start with the last issue first, what Mr. De Leon and you were just speaking about, and that is sort of the commitment to acting as a juror and enduring some personal sacrifice to do so. So I know that what you said is that you are one of two owners of a small business,
Yes, sir.
and not only do you own it, but you work in it, right? I think you said you're a mechanic.
That's correct.
Okay. It is true that this case can last as many as 4 weeks, where we will ask you to be with us not only all day, but that you would not be going home, so you could not work during the evening either. We sort of expect that that is going to have a negative impact on anybody. Anyone who's away from their family, friends, and certainly their employment for, let's say, a month is going to have negative impact. The term that we use is that something that is insurmountable. Not that it's not going to cause problems for you, but if it's such that literally you could not do it. So within that context, with sort of that as the filter, tell me what type of negative impact it would have on your business. And if you were away from it for a month, what would happen 5 weeks from now? What would happen when you got back to it? Would it be there? Would you be able to kick back in? Tell me a little bit more about that.
How to? I don't say it won't be there when I come back. But yeah, I most likely I will put a hardship on my other half, on my other partner, as he will. We were actually looking into hire somebody to help us with the load, due to the issues. To the amount of work we have. I don't want to say the business is going to be there when I go back.
It would be there.
It will be there,
okay,
for sure. And it's not like my whole life will shut down. It's not like that. It will create a hardship for sure.
Sure. Is it something, though, if asked to serve on the jury, it is something that you could survive and your business would survive?
If I will have to do this because I'm asked to do it, I'll survive. It will hardly, but it will.
Okay.
I'm sure it will.
Then I want to just ask you a few more questions then about your questionnaire and your answers to Mr. De Leon's questions. You said you've been here for about 3 years?
Yeah, 2010, March, I think, something like that.
Okay, and then your family is still back home, or some of them?
No, I moved here with my wife and my daughter.
Okay.
We came from.
Maybe you were talking about your extended family.
When he asked me about my family, I was thinking more of my dad and my mom. Me and my wife, we're going through a divorce, so I don't really spend a whole lot of time I spend time with my daughter, but not with my wife.
Where did you move here from?
I moved from I was living in Kuwait.
Kuwait. You don't watch very much TV, it sounds like.
No.
And don't know much about this case. Is that correct?
Just as I.
Rather than going through a lot of the media possibilities that are out there, because there's radio, TV, internet, friends, family, instead of doing that, with what you know about the case today, everything that you brought here with you, if I asked you for 3 significant facts, things that you remember about this case, just the 3 high points, tell me what they would be.
A young guy got shot. That I remember that. The circumstance, I guess, he was coming from the store. I remember that, and he was a neighborhood watch guy. The events, it was, I guess, something went on, a discussion or a fight or some stuff, and that's all I remember of. Really details into it, not really.
That's good. The whole purpose of what we're doing here right now, this part of it, while we're talking to you individually, is to identify what it is that you know about the case, put it on the table so that we can talk about it, as we're doing right now, and then make sure that you know and can agree that whatever you heard on the outside of this courtroom doesn't count. If you think that he was coming from a store and it turned out he wasn't, or that he was going to a store, or anything, that you agree with us that you will listen to only what you hear in the courtroom during the trial. Can you do that?
Yeah.
Any problem with being able to leave your memories, whatever they may be, about this case on the outside and only listen to the evidence presented?
Yeah. The only
Okay.
memories I have is from when I wrote the names on it.
Sure.
People talk about it, but
And
really
you agree
think
that,
about it.
obviously that's not evidence, right?
Of course not.
That's just people talking. If in fact you hear something that is different than what you thought happened, will you agree to just follow the facts you hear in the courtroom?
Of course.
The judge will tell you that. The judge will say to you, the only way you can come back with a lawful verdict is to listen to the evidence, listen to the testimony, look at the evidence, apply the law, and then reach a verdict. Can you agree to do that?
Yes, of course.
And you did say that you knew back when it happened, there was, I think your words, there was a lot of press going on about this.
Yeah.
You didn't pay particular attention to it?
Not really. Not really.
Did you get any sense from the media as to why George Zimmerman acted the way he did?
In which way? I mean.
Well,
this
you
is-
know, it sounds like you know that George Zimmerman shot Trayvon Martin,
Mhm.
right? And I'm just curious if the bit that you did listen to, if anything came across to you as to why George Zimmerman shot Trayvon Martin.
To be honest, what I heard the most was it was more the part that the police didn't act. I mean, that was the only thing really I heard the most about the police didn't act. Somebody got fired. Blah blah. You know, I guess it was a different side of the whole thing.
And I believe what you're speaking of is some of the publicity surrounding why George Zimmerman was not arrested
Maybe,
as
yeah.
quickly as some may have wanted.
Yeah, maybe.
Okay. And then I think you said also somebody was fired because maybe people
A
didn't
police
think-
guy, yeah, somebody in the police got fired from.
Okay. That issue alone, that fact, if that doesn't show up here in the courtroom, if we don't even talk about a police person or whatever,
Hmm.
is that going to cause you any concern? That's
really.
not part of the evidence?
I don't think that's evidence, is it?
Would you hold that against one side or the other, that that wasn't an issue that we felt should be presented to our jury?
I don't think so.
Okay. Let me just have a moment here.
Excuse me. Should please remain seated.
And we did talk about sources of media sort of impacting on you. And we've also talked, Mr. De Leon talked about talking to your family. Any people that you talked to, either in social groups or in church, anything like that, where this issue was discussed?
Maybe I came into people talking and I heard them talking, but really I'm not joining the conversation, just people talking about it. In a place of business, you have a lot of people of different backgrounds, different.
But as you answered earlier, nothing of significance that you
Not really.
remember here today?
Not really.
Thanks very much. No further questions, Sean?
Council approach when you're ready.
We're going to recess for lunch until 1 o'clock, and all those can go to lunch till 1. Okay, thank you. Court is in recess.